Viktor Frankl said, "Everything can be taken from a man but one thing, the last of the human freedoms. To choose one's attitude in any given set of circumstances, to choose one's way." This is Finding Human with Sue Jackson. Stay tuned for the next hour as Sue explores the human psyche, what makes us tick, and how to live better, more fulfilled and more meaningful lives. Only on 101.9 High FM.
Hello, this is Sue Jackson on the Finding Human program on High FM. My guests today are Clinton Fein and Bryan Schimmel. Welcome to both of you. We are on Zoom and they are sitting together so I can see them at least. Last week in the Jewish Report, there was an article on them, on the bullies and the bullied, and I would actually suggest that anyone who didn't read it would get it online to read it. Both Clinton and Bryan have gone on to have highly successful careers, and if I had to do justice to them and actually saying what they have done, it would take quite a few interviews to do that. I will give you a bit there about them. But Bryan's motto is live to inspire, and I would suggest that Clinton's should be live to question. Clinton was born in South Africa. He's an artist, he's a writer and an activist, and he's noted for his company Apollo Media's controversial website annoy.com. And its Supreme Court victory against Janet Reno, United States Attorney General, regarding the constitutionality of the Communications Decency Act in 1997. He has gone on to question many, many things. He's a writer, an artist, and an activist. So that's why your motto should be there. That he is a South African. He graduated from King David Linksfield High School and University of Witwatersrand in a Bachelor of Arts in Industrial Psychology. And then he lived in New York for a couple of years before moving to Los Angeles, where he began reporting directly to the president of Orient Pictures as part of the creative team for numerous films, among them Academy Award-winning Dances with Wolves and The Silence of the Lambs. From the outset, his work has led him into some high-profile confrontations. If you want to look up more about Clinton, please do so. It's Fein. Bryan Schimmel is widely regarded as one of the top music directors, arrangers, and orchestrators in South Africa. He's a 10-time Naledi Theatre Award nominee, winning 4 times for music direction of Chicago, Jersey Boys, and Annie, and for musical arrangements of Nights of Music. The other thing that I found, you've got many theatre credits to your name as well, Bryan. But after seeing the Queen, the Majesty, Our Majesty the Queen's Jubilee now, I see that you also did a presentation, a performance before Her Majesty the Queen, and of course our famous Nelson Mandela. So welcome to both of you. If you'd like to hear a lot more about them or read more about them, please look them up on Google or Safari. Now, Elie Wiesel, the Nobel Peace Prize winner, the Holocaust survivor, said, "I swore never to be silent whenever and wherever human beings endure suffering and humiliation. We must always take sides." You are nodding, Clinton. So would you like to start? I think what I should say first is to thank Lorraine Schrager for allowing your presentation to be at King David High School, Linksfield, and I was invited to that, and it was amazing. And I also want to just say to her that her students were exemplary in their behavior. They hung on both of your every single word. So, and sometimes it was not easy to listen to. And I think a lot of them were crying, and a lot of them were smiling, and a lot of them were definitely agreeing with what you both had to say. So, Clinton, would you like to start your story? Who are you, the bully or the bullied? Or both?
I certainly was the bully back then. You know, I think I think, I went to Highlands for my first year in high school, and everyone was bullied. Everyone coming from primary school into high school, everyone was bullied. It was part of the culture. So it wasn't as if I was singled out specifically. It just, pretty much everyone in that grade was bullied. But when for me, I had secrets, I had things to hide. And so in some ways it was a survival instinct for me to not be vulnerable and to not let it. I was gay, and it was the worst thing to be at that point, because I was raised to believe it was shameful and wrong. And so for me, it was a hiding mechanism. And so when I got to King David, I had learned strategically from Highlands how to hide and how to bully. And so I became the bully. And it was, again, not as an excuse or a justification, but that's what I became, and that's what I was.
And Bryan, what about you? What made you become the one that was being bullied?
I wouldn't say that there was anything that made me become. You ask an interesting question. You go, which of us was the bully, and which of us was the bullied? Back at the time, I was the target, and we've spoken at length about what actually sets up the power dynamic between somebody who's a bully and somebody who's bullied. I didn't have the tools, I didn't have the smarts, I didn't have the self-confidence, I didn't have the self-worth to present myself as being somebody who fitted in with a certain conformity. And that happens, whether it's in schools, pardon me, whether it's in schools, in the workplace, on the sports field, wherever, there's always this dynamic of how people coexist. And I was one of those who was an easy target. I didn't play sport. And I think things that have changed a lot since then. But back then, if you were not a sportsman, you were already not part of the crowd. And for anybody, and I see it in schools now, and in the workplace, and in places of worship, and in the cybersphere, anybody who appears vulnerable, anybody who is vulnerable is a potential target. And I'm going to go as far as to say that, yes, I may have been a target, and yes, I was bullied. I'm a bully myself, and I think
that's why I asked that dynamic: who was the bully and who was the bully?
I think I wasn't a bully then, but what I've recognized is that everybody at some level, we all have the capability of displaying and executing bullying behavior, whether it's being bitchy about somebody, whether it's unkind to somebody, or manipulating somebody, or gossip, or just, and often it's not even intentional bullying.
And we're going to get back to that shortly.
This is Finding Human with Sue Jackson, only on 101.9 High FM.
This is Sue Jackson, and I'm back on the Finding Human program, and my guests today are Bryan Schimmel and Clinton Fein. Bryan, no, actually, Clinton, when I heard you talking at the assembly, you said that you could understand in many ways the Uvalde, Texas gunman, and since then there have been so many more mass shootings in America. And you
Yes.
know, I was looking up about him, and he had a speech impediment. He also had a very bad home background. With his mother was on drugs, and he had to go and live with his grandmother. He was severely teased, and he had one friend, Stephen Grazia, who was his best friend in grade 8, and he said he was bullied hard, like bullied a lot of time, and he said he was bullied on social media and everywhere where he could be bullied. And he said, and he was the nicest of kids, a shy child. So what do you think happens that makes a shy, nice kid become a mass shooter?
I mean, it's a very good question, and I think that's part of the reason that we're even doing this, is that the consequences of ignoring bullying can be dire, if not deadly. And I think in his case, you know, certainly not an excuse or a justification. I think that it was understanding that bullied people can do a number of things. They can either internalize what's being directed at them, which can result in self-harm and self-destructive behavior and stuff that you know is taken on by the person bullied, or they can, like in this case of this Texas gunman, they can externalize it and take out that wrath on innocent children and teachers, which is, you know, so what triggers that kind of, you know, psychotic behavior? It's hard to say whether or not that kind of a kid was predestined to be like that. But certainly the bullying and the constant, you know, being made to feel less than, being made to feel, you know, it wasn't only his speech impediment, it was that he didn't come from the right background, he didn't have the right clothes. So there was a flaunting of privilege that was also bullying in terms of the way he perceived it. He also apparently, and I don't know whether this is true or not, according to one of the reports, they posted a picture of himself wearing eyeliner and was accused and mocked for being gay, even though he wasn't. And so those things, it's just the repetitive being just made to feel less than constantly, that it erupts or it manifests in some way. You know, this was a really unfortunate case of that.
And I think we've got to remember what Nelson Mandela said, that no one is born hating. No, you know, we're taught to hate, or we are bullied into hating, or hating ourselves, hating others. You know, we need to actually just, Bryan, you were saying what bullying is, and it's physical harm, verbal and emotional terrorism. It's sexual harassment. It's racism. And it can go bigger and bigger. It can be hitting, biting, kicking, punching, pinching, pulling of your hair. It can start like that, tripping you as you're walking past, and, you know, physical bullying, and of course sexual bullying, and using racial slurs. And then I think what we have to be very aware of now as well is cyberbullying. And I think that's getting bigger and bigger because it can so often be anonymous. So you can get away with that. Now, Bryan, going to you. When you left, I wanted to talk to you about the bystanders. Did you often notice people watching you being bullied and not helping?
I don't have the clearest memory of anybody specific, but it's interesting how since we did our presentations of Fear Freedom, which is what our presentation is called, and we can get into why it's called that. Since we did that, I've actually had people who've come to me who were in my class and who've said to me, I need to confess to you that I feel so guilty after seeing your presentation.
Wow.
And I was like, guilty for what? And they said, we saw what was happening to you and we did nothing. And I said, first of all, after 40 years, you need not have any guilt, but I appreciate you coming to tell me. But I did say to them, I said, just out of interest, why? And for a lot of them, it's the fear of retribution. It's the fear of if they were to report it, if they were to stand up for me, that they would be also become targets. And typically the people who were bystanding and not saying anything were people who fit in the category I mentioned earlier of people who themselves are vulnerable and perceived as weak, and might become targets themselves. The difference is between that kind of character, and the difference is between that and the student at the time who I reached out to, who became a mentor, who was actually older than me, and he was a student leader. He represented strength, and he represented confidence, and he was beloved by everybody in the school.
So did he represent fairness to you?
Yes. Yes.
Okay, go on.
And an interesting thing is that he wasn't a bystander who watched it happen. I had to go to him and open up to him.
That took a lot of courage for you to do.
It was very risky. It was incredibly risky, but it was like, if I didn't do that, it was a case of what could have been an alternative. Would I have done self-harm, which I ended up doing a lot later in life as a result of being bullied? Could I have done self-harm? Could I have become one of the many suicide statistics that we have seen in recent years of teenagers who don't have anybody to actually reach out to, who don't know how to reach out to?
So when you reached out to him, did you do so anonymously, or did you do it as you did? Okay, and I know you wrote a note to him. I remember that from your presentation.
Yes.
So you asked him to meet you somewhere, but you didn't know if he was going to be there or not.
Because my thing was, I wrote it anonymously, and I said, please, can you meet me behind the hall? And he remembers me writing, I need somebody to talk to. He remembers me writing that. And if I wrote it anonymously and he never showed up, then it would be my secret that I reached out to him and he never showed up. So part of the not saying who I was about the fear of being outed as this person who had reached out. But the risk was, he might not show up, or he would, and the risk was that even if he did, it might not go so well. As I say in the piece, what if it all went horribly wrong? What if he arrived and looked at me and went,
not for me,
for me, and bullied me as well? But it was a calculated risk, because I looked at somebody who, I didn't just randomly go, you. I'd studied him for a while. I'd studied him. He was the darling of the school. He was loved by everybody. He excelled at every sport. And the clincher was actually the fact that he actually performed in one of the house plays, which was a Greek tragedy. He was the narrator in Antigone. And when I saw that he did that and was not ridiculed by his own peers, I was like, this is the dude.
So what would your advice be, both of yours, to children or adults, whoever's being bullied now? How would you say to them, find someone you can trust? What would you say? Yes, Clinton, I can see you nodding your head.
Yeah, because, one of the things King David is looking at doing, King David High School, is looking at launching the equivalent of a Find Your Gary campaign based on Bryan's story of reaching out. And so we've been giving it a lot of thought, like what does that actually look like in terms of finding someone who is not going to respond, who all the fears that Bryan had about what if it went all horribly wrong? What if, especially in today's age, what if you send a text and then it gets shown around so that you get victimized by even reaching out? How do you counter those things? And one of the ways to do it is, if schools do want to take it seriously, is perhaps get a group of people who volunteer. Maybe they have a G badge or something that identifies them, and they can be the kinds of person like Gary, this well-rounded sportsman, but they don't have to be that. They can be anyone, because it's someone who's happy, it's someone who's compassionate, it's someone who's kind. And by being able to have a group that you can go to and know that you're not going to be ostracized for having approached someone from that group, that actually allows people to become that, and to become the kind of people, the kind of, not even only a protector, but someone who you can then talk to, someone you can communicate with. And that can make the difference between someone having an absolutely awful time at school to someone actually finding and appreciating themselves and their self-worth. So I think it's an incredible program if it can be implemented like that.
Absolutely. And in the Holocaust literature lately, they're showing a lot about the, how do you pronounce it, reciprocity, is that the right word, of people who have survived, children who have survived, they went in young, they came out, say, at 13 or 14. And what stopped them from being bullied was often to find one person who was a mentor to them, and who could, and what was his name, Heimler? I actually wrote it down. Just let me find it quickly. He said, I will find it. He actually said that without that, so often you didn't survive. It was one person with showing you kindness that actually helped you face the next day or the next hour. One of the things he did say was Eugene Heimler. He was an ex-Buchenwald inmate, and he ended up as a social therapist. He said none of us who have survived would be here unless there had been others who helped us in our survival. So in other words, without those others, they would not have survived. And in an interview, they said through innumerable small acts of humanist, most of them covert, but everywhere in evidence, survivors were able to maintain societal structures workable enough to keep themselves alive and morally sane by helping one another. And it was often by getting someone slightly older than you. Yes, Bryan, I can see you wanted to say something.
I just sort of want to add to that one of the ways in which to identify that person,
yes,
is comes back to the bystanders. Because if the bystanders are seeing something, it's the thing of if you see something, do something, as opposed to taking on the bully, whether it's cyberspace, workplace, wherever it is. If the bystander who is watching the whole thing can help identify a mentor, the bystanders, or one of the ways the bystander can help is to identify a mentor and say, listen, this is happening, this person is in trouble. Mm-hmm. Because generally the bullied person is too compromised and too vulnerable to actually see past that.
Did you ever go home and talk about it, either of you? Did you go home and talk about being a bully, or Clinton, you saying, that you had to be a certain person?
No, I mean, it's interesting because I think there was inherently, there must have been some shame around it, because a lot of people who know me from school were surprised to find out that I was a bully.
Well, so you went out with the best looking girls, didn't you?
That's another story. But yeah, but a lot of people didn't know that I was a bully. They didn't know that it was very selective. And so some people were very surprised. But the one thing that Bryan mentioned that struck me, that talking about the person, the victim being in trouble, the bully is also in trouble. And that's sort of what we're trying to also address is
Very
that what
definitely.
what makes a bully a bully. And so if someone's being bullied, there's also, it's a matter of not just accommodating what the victim needs to redress that, but also identifying what's happening with the bully.
And where
is
is
it
he
something that's
being bullied? Where, what is happening at home? What's making him behave like this?
But when Clint and I were working on the script and we were rehearsing, and we did a rehearsal for his mom, and she said to me, she said, "I had no clue."
Huh? Is that so? No clue
She
that you
also
were gay, or no clue that you had been a bully?
Or both.
What did you say then, just before that? What did you say about her? Your mom?
No, I said she was actually clueless about both. But that's not about her so much as clueless about me being able to hide it so well.
Yeah, absolutely. And you, Bryan, was there no one that you could go home and discuss it with and get some help from?
Not really, because I had a whole different dynamic going on at home with me and my father. And that's a separate discussion from this, which, but basically, my father bullied me as well.
Okay.
But I have long forgiven him. But
Your
basically,
self-esteem was low then.
was very low. The only thing that I had certainty about was when I got behind the piano.
Oh,
When I got behind the piano, that is when is when I felt in charge, and I had a sense of self-worth, and a sense of self-respect.
and
But
you
once
went on to do great things with that. We're going to get back to that shortly.
This is Finding Human with Sue Jackson, only on 101.9 High FM.
If you would like to contact us, please do so on SMS 34519, or you can telegram us on, what's our telegram number again? 061 895 1019. If you have anything to ask Clinton or Bryan, please do so. This is Sue Jackson, and I'm back with Bryan Schimmel and Clinton Fein, and we are having a discussion about bullies and bullying and their what they are actually going to be launching themselves, of giving people some actual understanding of what happens in both people's lives. Bryan, so you felt most at home when you were playing the piano and being creative. So you actually, you probably found your inner core then, your strength came out in that.
But I always use the phrase, I say, being at the piano was my refuge.
Ah, wow. And then it's amazing that you went, that was your safe space. And yet you went on to self-harm yourself, even in that space.
Which is the echo, of what we were saying earlier about the Texas gunman. He was bullied, and what was his ultimate vent? The ultimate vent was that he went on a shooting spree. There needed to be a vent. For me, in later life, I self-harmed and I got into drug addiction, and that was a form of self-destruction, because my belief in who I was was informed by what I'd experienced at school.
So how did you reprogram your own mind to actually go on to achieve such great things as you have?
Well, I mean, I'd lived in the US, which is when all the self-harm started. And the long and short of it is, I mean, there is a lengthier description, a lengthier explanation of this. But the long and short of it is that after 7 years in the US, I came home. I came home to be around people who valued me, who respected me, who cared, and to an industry that acknowledged me.
So you came home to heal.
Came home to heal.
And yes, sorry. Go on.
No. And I think it's because of being on the receiving end of being bullied that I, strangely enough, I have an empathy with the bullies. You know,
that's interesting.
I do, because I go, I mean, it's like you said, in the Mandela quote, people are not born haters.
Mm.
So why do people? Why do they start discriminating?
Mm.
Why do they start being unkind? Why do they start? And it has to do with fear of the unknown, fear of what you don't know.
Absolutely.
It has to do with, and I controversially say, particularly in privileged schools, I believe that a lot of bullies are enabled by their parents.
Well,
parents
that's a whole discussion of its own of today's world too.
Because a lot of parents will insist that their kids are darlings and not actually recognize that they are displaying
bullying tactics.
Bullying behavior.
Absolutely. And that's another subject we'll get onto. I'm actually, Meryl Malkin is going to be coming on my program to discuss exactly that. But Clinton, now going back to you, you went to America, and then how did the two of you meet up again? I mean, I know I've read your article, but not everyone has. So tell us how you met.
So in a nutshell, we have a mutual friend, Elaine Soriano. And I had come back on a visit to South Africa, and he had mentioned Bryan in passing. And I hadn't thought of Bryan since my school days. And when I thought, I was reminded of, that was actually what reminded me that I was a bully, because I had completely blocked that. That's not who I was. It's not how I operate in the world anymore. And so it brought up memories that were kind of shameful for me, that's how I was. And when I remembered Bryan. And so I sent him a friend request on Facebook, which he accepted, but there was no dialogue that happened. He wasn't ready at that point, I guess, to unpack it. And so, but I read about him and was, amazed to see what he had accomplished and who he had become. So I was kind of seeing him for the first time as a human and as someone, that I could be friends with. Just a lot of that kind of stuff came up. And then a second time when I visited again, Elaine said, why don't you and Bryan come for lunch? And I didn't think Bryan would come. I really didn't. I knew it could be confrontational. And he ended up coming. Elaine ended up being late. So Bryan and I there was no intermediary.
You had to chat. Yeah.
I sort of was sitting there hoping that he had maybe my memories were wrong and that maybe time had softened things. And Bryan
shaking his head. They hadn't softened it.
Yeah, no. And so I said to him, hi. And the first thing he said to me was, you say it, Bryan.
I remember you from your resting bitch face.
And I knew immediately he remembered everything. And so that was...
Clinton, the one thing that I remember both of you saying very clearly was that you remembered each other's eyes. You remembered the pain. You remembered the anger. So what did you remember about Bryan's eyes, Clinton?
One of I became a photographer in recent years, and one of the exhibitions I did was a reenactment of the torture in Abu Ghraib in Iraq, and I did reenactments of those using models, and it was daunting photo session. And one of the things that they did, the torturers in Abu Ghraib, is that they put sandbags over the heads of the prisoners. And when I did that in the reenactment of the shoots, once you cover someone's eyes, you can actually be very inhumane because you're not seeing the eyes.
Absolutely.
And what it resonated with me because I remember Bryan's eyes. I remember the fear. I remember the hurt, and it stuck with me. I mean, I may have blocked it and put it aside, but the second we reconciled and even just met, I remembered that, and that stuck with me. And so I think there's a humanness in the eyes, and I don't know what Bryan saw in my eyes. I don't know what
vice versa.
And vice versa.
When I looked at him, I just remembered it. You know how in movies when they do flashbacks of memories, and it's like and they're like fractured memories. When I looked at him across the table, I looked into his eyes, and I was seeing the moments in the playground. I was seeing the moments where I'd hide in the corridor or hide behind a pillar, hoping not to see him, because I knew what the day might bring.
So both of you have done a lot of healing, even just in talking to each other and in putting this fear freedom together. You have made a huge step forward. We've just got to go back to break for a moment.
This is Finding Human with Sue Jackson, only on 101.9 High FM.
Hello, this is Sue Jackson on the Finding Human program, and I'm with Clinton Fein and Bryan Schimmel, and we have been talking about the bullying and being bullied and being a bully on both, and they are talking about what they want to actually roll out there to the schools, to adults, to parents, to whoever is going to be interested in hearing. And I think this is incredibly important for everyone to hear, this fear freedom. Just tell me what we're going to be told shortly to sort of start wrapping up. But what is the main message you would like to get across, Clinton?
I mean, just by the way, just to communicate this to the listeners, we are going to be doing this at the Johannesburg Holocaust and Genocide Center on June the 29th.
Oh, good.
And so tickets are going to be available, I think, from later today or tomorrow on Quicket. But that is, it's going to be an opportunity for people to actually see it again, who are not part of the school or whatever. I think that one of the big takeaways for me is that we're looking at reframing it. As we say in the beginning, we don't think you can eradicate bullying because bullying always has and always will exist. It's a matter of how you manage bullying and how you deal with bullying rather than trying to eradicate it. We look at how do you make an impact with it. And it starts with having conversations like these. We're even starting to talk about even reframing the language. So even the label bully, someone isn't a bully, someone's exhibiting or doing bullying behavior. So rather than branding them as a bully, there's more opportunity to remedy that situation by recognizing it as bullying behavior rather than just labeling it. And so that's one of the things that we're hoping to get out of it, is to start this kind of a conversation, to have this kind of a dialogue, because the healing is so rewarding. And in our case, we're lucky we got a friendship out of it. But even if we didn't, just the ability to apologize, to make amends, the ability to forgive, those are incredible freeing things in the context of freedom, going from fear to freedom.
Very definitely. Elie Wiesel talks a lot about indifference and how indifference can actually just really destroy the world. And I think what both of you are actually saying here is we cannot step back any longer. This is enough already. And indifference is not going to be working. We all have to find our voices. Bryan, what would you like to say?
First of all, I want to just correct the first paragraph in the South African Jewish report, because it misquotes us as the Jewish report is wont to do. It says that we are not, the thrust of our piece is we are not trying to eradicate it. We are looking for a paradigm that works towards harm reduction. And yes, in terms of what you were saying earlier about not being indifferent and making a difference, the phrase I used in our Q&A session on the first evening we did it was, I said, you don't start the ripple without the stone being thrown in the water. And people might ask, well, what makes, there are so many anti-bullying campaigns and so many speakers and psychologists and therapists and counselors and social workers and what who speak about the subject. But for anybody who wants to see what our presentation is about, it has a uniqueness, and that uniqueness is it's two people who were once a bully and a victim, who are now revisiting their own story on the same stage.
Absolutely. I'm being told to wrap up, but I salute both of you for the courage it's taken to come out and tell your story and tell it with such honesty that it touched my heart. I was sitting with Renee Posniak from the Holocaust Center, and both of us had tears rolling down our cheeks as we listened to your story. And, Viktor Frankl said, no matter what life experiences we confront, we always have the inner freedom to decide our attitude and to remain true to our character and duty. And I think that fits very much into both of you. Thank you so much for being with me. And
Thanks,
we will do it again. Once you've started this, I'd love you to come back on my program again. I will be getting quite a lot of feedback, I know, and I'll send it on to you. For anyone who's wanting to see a really nice YouTube, Craig's telling me to wrap up, there's a lovely YouTube for children called You Gotta Say No. And it's a YouTube. It's Judy Erwig and Wendy Fein. Judy's a good friend of mine, but I promise you I don't get anything out of this. But we are ending now. Thank you, Craig. Thank you, Vusi. And thank you, Makundi, for keeping us on air.